What happened when our lifeguard wouldn't leave his chair? I was 16 feet underwater when I realized our lifeguard wasn't moving. My little sister Mia had been down there for at least 30 seconds, her blonde ponytail floating like seaweed as she scraped the bottom of the deep end for the dive rings we'd thrown. Through my goggles, I could see her chest starting to convulse. She was out of air. I shot to the surface, broke through gasping, and screamed at the lifeguard stand. Nathan Reeves sat there like a statue, sunglasses on, whistle around his neck, looking past me at absolutely nothing. My sister surfaced 5 seconds later, choking and coughing so hard she vomited pool water. He didn't move. He didn't even turn his head. That was the first time I knew something was catastrophically wrong. It was August 14th, 2023, at Riverside Community Pool, and I'd been coming there every summer since I was 7. The place was a fixture in our small Oregon town of Millbrook, tucked between the library and the old fire station, with its bright blue water and faded yellow umbrellas that had been there since the 90s. My mom had been bringing me and Mia religiously every Wednesday and Saturday, packing our lunches in the same ratty cooler, slathering us with SPF 50 until we looked like ghosts. Normal, safe, the kind of place where nothing bad was supposed to happen. Nathan Reeves had been our lifeguard for 3 summers. He was 24, had his certification plastered on the wall in the office, and everyone loved him. Parents thought he was responsible. Kids thought he was cool because he had tattoos and let us jump off the diving board even when we weren't supposed to. My mom trusted him completely, which is why she felt comfortable leaving us there while she worked her double shift at Millbrook General Hospital. I was 15, old enough to watch my 10-year-old sister, young enough to still believe that adults in positions of authority always had everything under control. After Mia stopped coughing, I pulled her to the shallow end and looked back at Nathan. He was still sitting there, perfectly still, hands gripping the armrests of his elevated chair. His whistle gleamed in the sunlight, unused. I counted 12 other people in the pool that afternoon, mostly families with small children, a couple of teenagers tanning on the concrete, and Mrs. Callahan doing her slow laps in the lap lane like she did every single day. Nobody else seemed to notice anything wrong. But I noticed. I noticed that Nathan hadn't blown his whistle once in the past hour. I noticed that his head never turned to scan the pool like it was supposed to. I noticed that when a toddler slipped on the wet concrete near the diving board 10 minutes earlier and started wailing, Nathan didn't react at all. The kid's mother scooped him up, shooting a confused glance at the lifeguard stand, but she didn't say anything. Nobody said anything. That's the thing about people. We assume someone else is handling it, that surely we must be wrong, that surely there's an explanation. I told myself I was overreacting. Nathan was probably just tired. It was 3:15 in the afternoon, hot as hell, and he'd been sitting up there since the pool opened at noon. Maybe he was in that zone lifeguards get into, that focused state where they're watching everything even though it looks like they're watching nothing. That's what I told myself. But my hands were shaking as I wrapped Mia in her towel, and my stomach had that sick, dropping feeling you get when you know something is wrong, but you can't quite articulate what it is. Mia was still coughing, her eyes red from the chlorine and crying, and I kept looking up at Nathan, willing him to notice, to climb down from that chair and check on her, to do literally anything that would prove my instincts wrong. He didn't move. His chest rose and fell with breath, so I knew he was alive, but that was the only movement I could detect. Even from 15 feet away, I could see his fingers gripping the armrest so tightly his knuckles had gone white. "I want to go home," Mia whispered, and I nodded, gathering our stuff. But before we left, I needed to know. I needed to confirm what I was seeing. So I walked over to the lifeguard stand, my flip-flops slapping against the wet concrete, and I stood directly in front of Nathan and looked up at him. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Nathan, you okay up there?" Nothing. No response. His eyes were hidden behind reflective sunglasses, but his face was pale, almost gray, and there was a thin line of drool running from the corner of his mouth down to his chin. My blood turned to ice. "Nathan?" I said louder. A couple of the moms nearby turned to look at me. One of them, Mrs. Whitfield, frowned and walked over. "Is everything all right?" she asked, looking between me and the lifeguard stand. "I don't think he's okay," I said, my voice coming out smaller than I intended. "He won't answer me." Mrs. Whitfield climbed the first 2 rungs of the ladder. Nathan, can you hear me?" Still nothing. She climbed higher, reached out and touched his shoulder. His whole body swayed slightly, but he didn't respond. "Oh my God," she breathed, and that's when she started screaming for someone to call 911. The pool erupted into chaos. Parents started pulling their kids out of the water, and one of the teenage boys, Danny Fitzgerald, ran to the office to get the pool manager. I stood there frozen, watching Mrs. Whitfield try to shake Nathan's shoulder again. His head lolled to the side, and his sunglasses slipped down his nose. His eyes were open but unfocused, staring at nothing, pupils dilated and uneven. One pupil was huge, the other normal-sized. I'd watched enough medical dramas with my mom to know what that meant. Brain injury, stroke, something catastrophically wrong happening inside his skull. The pool manager, Gerald Hoffman, came running out of the office, his polo shirt stained with mustard from his lunch. Gerald was 56, had managed Riverside Pool for 18 years, and was generally regarded as competent but lazy. He took one look at Nathan and his face went from annoyed to panicked in about 3 seconds. "Everybody out of the pool," he shouted. "Pool's closed. Everyone out now." He pulled out his phone and started barking into it, but he was talking to someone at the pool district office, not 911. That struck me as weird, but everything was weird now. Everything felt like I was watching it happen from underwater, muffled and slow. Mrs. Whitfield was still trying to get Nathan to respond, and finally, she and Gerald managed to get him down from the chair. His legs wouldn't support him. They basically had to carry him to the office, his feet dragging on the concrete, leaving wet streaks behind him. The ambulance arrived 11 minutes later. I know because I was watching the clock on the pool house wall, counting every second, wondering if those 11 minutes mattered, if Nathan was dying, if he was already dead and just didn't know it yet. 2 paramedics rushed in with a stretcher and equipment, and they disappeared into the office with Gerald. The rest of us, about 20 people in various states of undress, wrapped in towels, dripping chlorinated water onto the pavement, stood there in the parking lot waiting for someone to tell us what was happening. My mom called at 3:48, and I told her the pool was closed because the lifeguard got sick. I didn't mention the part where he'd been unresponsive for God knows how long while we all swam beneath him, because I didn't want to think about it. I didn't want to think about what could have happened if someone had actually needed him, if Mia hadn't surfaced on her own, if that toddler had hit his head instead of just crying. They loaded Nathan into the ambulance at 4:03. I watched them wheel him out, an oxygen mask on his face, IV in his arm, neck braced. He still wasn't moving on his own. Gerald stood in the parking lot looking like he was going to vomit, talking rapidly on his phone. I heard fragments. Liability. Investigation. Don't know how long. We need to get ahead of this. The paramedics slammed the ambulance doors and pulled away, sirens wailing. Gerald disappeared back into the office without addressing any of us. One by one, families packed up and left, muttering to each other, casting worried glances back at the pool. Mrs. Whitfield came over to me before she left. "You were the first one to notice something was wrong," she said, putting her hand on my shoulder. "You probably saved that young man's life." I didn't feel like I'd saved anything. I felt like I'd watched something terrible happen in slow motion and done nothing to stop it. Mia and I walked home in silence, our wet swimsuits soaking through our clothes, the afternoon sun beating down on us like an accusation. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every detail in my head. The way Nathan's fingers had gripped the chair, the drool on his chin, his unfocused eyes, the uneven pupils. I kept thinking about the timeline. When had he stopped being responsive? How long had he been sitting up there, brain hemorrhaging or stroking out or whatever was happening to him, while we all played in the pool below? I'd been there since noon. Had he been okay at noon? I tried to remember. I had a vague memory of him waving at someone when I first arrived, but I couldn't be sure. Maybe that was yesterday. Maybe I was making it up. At 1:30 in the morning, I finally gave up on sleep and did what any 15-year-old would do. I went online. I searched for information about lifeguards having medical emergencies, about strokes in young people, about liability and negligence. What I found made my stomach turn. There were cases, dozens of them, of lifeguards having seizures or heart attacks or strokes while on duty, and people drowning because no one realized the person who was supposed to save them couldn't save themselves. The next day, Thursday, the pool was closed. No explanation posted, just a handwritten sign on the chain link fence. Closed until further notice. My mom had the day off, and I told her everything over breakfast. Not just that Nathan got sick, but that I didn't think he'd been responsive for at least an hour before anyone noticed, maybe longer. Her face went pale. "Are you absolutely sure?" she asked. "Could he have just been focused on watching the pool?" I shook my head. "Mom, Mia almost drowned right in front of him. She was coughing up water. A kid fell and cried for 5 minutes. He didn't move, not even a little bit." She was quiet for a long time, staring at her coffee. Finally, she said, "I need to make some calls." My mom didn't tell me who she called, but I found out later it was the pool district board and her friend who worked in hospital administration. By Friday, still no word about Nathan, still no official statement from the pool district, and the whispers in town were getting louder. I ran into Danny Fitzgerald at the grocery store on Saturday. He'd been at the pool that day too, the one who'd run to get Gerald. "Did you hear?" he said, lowering his voice like we were sharing classified information. "Nathan had a massive stroke. He's in the ICU at Portland Memorial. They're saying he might not make it." My throat tightened. "When did it happen? Like, when did the stroke actually start?" Danny shrugged. "No one knows. But I heard he'd been texting his girlfriend weird stuff all morning. Like gibberish. She thought he was drunk or playing around." My skin prickled. "What time was that?" "Like 11:30 maybe? Before the pool even opened." Before the pool opened. That meant Nathan had climbed up into that chair and started his shift while already actively having a stroke. That meant for 3.5 hours, maybe 4, he'd been sitting there unable to move, unable to call for help, his brain slowly dying while children played in the water below him. Monday morning, my mom got a call. It was from Gerald Hoffman. He wanted to speak with me. My mom put it on speaker. "Alexis." Gerald's voice came through tinny and nervous. "I wanted to personally thank you for your quick thinking on Wednesday. You potentially saved Nathan's life by alerting us to the situation." There was something off about his tone, too smooth, too rehearsed. "We're conducting a thorough internal review of our safety protocols, and we'd love to get your statement about what you observed that day. Could you and your mother come by the pool office this afternoon?" My mom and I exchanged glances. "What kind of statement?" I asked. "Just a formality," Gerald said quickly. "Standard procedure for any incident. Nothing to worry about. We'll have our district attorney there to take notes. Make sure everything's documented properly." Attorney. The word hung in the air like a threat. "We'll think about it and get back to you," my mom said, and hung up before Gerald could respond. My mom called her friend Beverly Yang, who was a personal injury attorney in Portland. Beverly listened to the whole story, asked detailed questions about the timeline, about who saw what when, about Gerald's phone call. When my mom finished, Beverly was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Don't go to that meeting. Don't sign anything. Don't give any statements without legal representation. I'm coming to Millbrook tomorrow, and we're going to have a very serious conversation about what happened at that pool." She arrived on Thursday morning, dressed in a sharp navy suit, carrying a leather briefcase that looked like it cost more than my mom's car. Beverly Yang had been practicing law for 19 years, had won 3 major negligence cases against municipal facilities, and had a reputation for being absolutely relentless. She sat up at our kitchen table and pulled out a yellow legal pad. "Tell me everything," she said, "from the moment you arrived at the pool until the moment Nathan was loaded into the ambulance. Every detail, no matter how small." I talked for an hour and a half. Beverly took notes in rapid shorthand, occasionally stopping me to ask clarifying questions. How high was the lifeguard chair? Approximately 10 feet. What was the weather like? Clear, sunny, temperature around 86 degrees. How many people were in the pool when you first noticed Nathan wasn't responding? 12, maybe 15? Did anyone else try to get his attention before Mrs. Whitfield? Not that I saw. When I finished, Beverly sat back and tapped her pen against her legal pad. "Here's what I think happened," she said. "Nathan Reeves had a stroke, likely around 11 in the morning, before his shift started. He should never have climbed into that chair. He was probably already experiencing symptoms, confusion, motor impairment, visual disturbances, but either he didn't recognize what was happening or he recognized it and made a catastrophically bad decision to work anyway. Either way, the moment he climbed into that chair while impaired, the facility became responsible for what happened next." "But it's not his fault he had a stroke," my mom said. Beverly nodded. "You're right. The stroke isn't his fault. But what happens next is absolutely the pool district's fault. Because here's the thing. Nobody checked on him. Not once in nearly 4 hours. There's supposed to be supervision. There are protocols. Someone should have rotated him out for breaks. Someone should have noticed he was in distress. Instead, they let him sit up there, effectively unresponsive, while children swam in the pool below him. That's negligence. That's a massive liability." She pulled out her phone and showed us an article. 2 years ago, a lifeguard in California had a seizure while on duty. A child drowned because there was no backup supervision. The family sued. The facility paid out $4.2 million. The pool district was found criminally negligent. My stomach dropped. Could someone have drowned that day? Beverly looked at me seriously. "Your sister almost did, didn't she?" The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd been trying so hard not to think about it in those terms, but Beverly was right. Mia had been underwater too long. She'd surfaced on her own, but what if she hadn't? What if she'd panicked? What if I hadn't been there? "The pool district knows this," Beverly continued. "That's why Gerald called you. That's why he wants your statement. They're trying to control the narrative, get everyone's story locked down before anyone realizes how bad this actually was. They probably want you to sign something saying Nathan seemed fine, that this was a sudden, unpredictable event, that everyone responded appropriately. If you sign that, it becomes much harder to hold them accountable later. Accountable for what? My mom asked. For failing to protect the children in their care, Beverly said. For not having adequate safety protocols. For not supervising their employee. For allowing a man who was actively having a stroke to work as the sole lifeguard on duty. My mom's hands were shaking. What do we do? Beverly snapped her briefcase shut. I'm going to request all incident reports, personnel files, and security footage from that day. I'm going to find out exactly what the pool district knew and when they knew it. And I'm going to make sure that if this ever goes public, the truth comes out. She looked at me. Are you okay with that? Because once we start asking questions, things are going to get complicated. The pool district will push back. They might try to discredit you. They might try to make this go away quietly. I thought about Mia coughing up pool water. I thought about that toddler crying on the concrete. I thought about Nathan sitting in that chair, trapped inside his own failing body, unable to ask for help. I want the truth to come out, I said, whatever it takes. The next 3 weeks were a blur of legal documents and tense phone calls. Beverly filed a Freedom of Information Act request for all records related to Nathan Reeves's employment and the incident on August 14th. The pool district fought it, claiming privacy concerns, but Beverly was relentless. She got the security footage. When she showed it to us, I felt physically ill. The timestamp started at 11:56 a.m. Nathan climbed the lifeguard chair at 11:58, moving slowly, using both hands to grip the rails. He sat down, and you could see even from the grainy camera angle that something was wrong. His movements were stiff, mechanical. At 12:01, he reached up to adjust his sunglasses, but his hand missed and he hit himself in the face. He tried again, succeeded. For the next 3 hours and 46 minutes, he sat almost completely motionless. You could see his head moving occasionally, little jerks and twitches, but that was it. At 2:15 p.m., you could see me and Mia in the pool. At 2:47, you could see Mia coughing after she surfaced. At 3:11, the toddler fell. Nathan didn't react to any of it. At 3:52, you could see me standing in front of the lifeguard chair, trying to get his attention. 3 minutes later, Mrs. Whitfield started climbing the ladder. Beverly paused the video. Notice anything missing? She asked. I looked closer at the timestamp, at the angle of the camera. There's no one else, I said slowly. There should be a pool manager doing rounds, right? Someone checking on him? Beverly smiled grimly. Exactly. Gerald Hoffman was supposed to do rounds every 30 minutes. That's standard protocol. He did rounds at noon, then he disappeared into his office and didn't come out until you raised the alarm. 4 hours. In 4 hours, he never once checked on his lifeguard. She pulled out another document. And here's the smoking gun. Nathan's phone records. At 11:43 a.m., he sent a text to his girlfriend. Quote, something's wrong, can't think straight, everything's sideways. At 11:51, he sent another one. Should I go home? Don't feel right. She replied at 11:54. Yes, go home now, don't drive, I'm coming to get you. He never responded. Why? Because he was already climbing into that lifeguard chair. My mom put her hand over her mouth. He knew something was wrong. He knew, and he went to work anyway. Or he was already too impaired to make rational decisions, Beverly said. Stroke patients often don't recognize the severity of their symptoms. But here's the critical point. Even if Nathan made a bad decision, the pool district had multiple opportunities to catch it. Gerald should have noticed during his noon rounds that Nathan wasn't responding normally. The front desk staff should have noticed when he didn't come in for his scheduled break at 2 p.m. There were system failures at every level. She pulled out her phone. I spoke with Nathan's doctors yesterday. He's awake now, but he has significant cognitive impairment. He remembers climbing the chair. He remembers feeling dizzy and confused. He doesn't remember anything after that until he woke up in the hospital. The stroke damaged his left motor cortex and affected his ability to speak and move. He's 24 years old and he may never fully recover. The weight of that settled over us like a shroud. Beverly continued. I also spoke with the Millbrook Police Department. They're opening an investigation into potential criminal negligence. Detective James Kowalski is heading it up. He has 12 years of experience with cases like this. He wants to interview you, Alexis, and any other witnesses who were there that day. He's particularly interested in the timeline, exactly when Nathan stopped responding, who noticed, and how long it took for management to intervene. Are they going to arrest Gerald? I asked. Beverly shook her head. Not yet. They need to establish a clear pattern of negligence and recklessness. But if they find that Gerald knowingly allowed an impaired employee to work, or that he failed to follow mandatory safety protocols, yes, criminal charges are possible. Reckless endangerment, at minimum. If someone had died, it would be involuntary manslaughter. That Friday, I gave my statement to Detective Kowalski in an interview room at the Millbrook police station. He was a tall man with graying hair and kind eyes, wearing a rumpled suit that made him look more like a teacher than a cop. He had a voice recorder on the table between us and a stack of printed photographs, screenshots from the security footage. "I just want to understand what you saw and when," he said gently. "Take your time. There's no rush." I went through it again, the same story I'd told Beverly, the same timeline, the same details. He stopped me frequently to ask questions. "When you first noticed Nathan wasn't moving, did you check the time?" "Yes, it was around 2:45. "Did you see Gerald at any point during the afternoon?" "No, not until after the emergency." "Did Nathan make any sounds, any indication he was aware of what was happening around him?" "No, nothing." When I finished, Detective Kowalski sat back and sighed. "You understand how serious this is, right? If your sister had drowned, if any of those kids had gotten into trouble, Nathan couldn't have helped them. He was physically incapable, and nobody in a position of authority noticed for nearly 4 hours." "Is that illegal?" I asked. "Is it a crime to not notice?" Detective Kowalski pulled out one of the photographs. It showed Gerald in his office, feet up on his desk, watching something on his computer. The timestamp read 2:33 p.m. "This is what Gerald was doing while you were trying to get Nathan's attention," he said. "He was watching YouTube videos, not security footage, not monitoring the pool, YouTube." He pulled out another photo. "This is the pool district's employee manual. Section 4, paragraph 3. Pool managers must conduct visual rounds of all facility areas every 30 minutes during operating hours. Lifeguards on duty must be assessed for alertness and responsiveness during each round. Any signs of impairment or distress must be immediately reported and addressed." Gerald didn't follow protocol. That's not just negligence. In this context, with children's lives at stake, that's reckless endangerment. Over the next 2 weeks, the investigation expanded. Detective Kowalski interviewed every person who'd been at the pool that day. Mrs. Whitfield gave a statement corroborating mine. Danny Fitzgerald described how Gerald had seemed panicked and disorganized when the emergency happened. The front desk attendant, a 16-year-old girl named Sophie Clark, told police that she'd noticed Nathan seemed out of it when he came in that morning but didn't say anything because she didn't want to get him in trouble. 3 other witnesses described how long Nathan had been unresponsive. The evidence was overwhelming. On September 9th, the Millbrook City Council held an emergency meeting to discuss the pool district. Beverly attended. So did my mom and I, sitting in the back row of the council chambers, listening as the council members tore into the pool district's safety record. It turned out this wasn't the first incident. 2 years ago, a lifeguard had fallen asleep on duty, and a parent had to rescue their own child from the deep end. 18 months ago, chemical levels in the pool had been dangerously high for 3 consecutive days before anyone noticed. 6 months ago, a ladder had broken and a child had fallen and broken his arm. Every time, the pool district had quietly settled, paid out, and moved on without implementing real changes. Councilmember Patricia Ung stood up, her voice shaking with anger. "We have failed these children. We have failed our community. The pool district has operated with impunity for years, and we have enabled it by looking the other way. No more. I am calling for a complete independent audit of pool district operations, immediate suspension of Gerald Hoffman pending criminal investigation, and a moratorium on pool operations until we can guarantee the safety of every child who walks through those gates." The motion passed unanimously. Gerald was suspended the next day. The pool remained closed. Detective Kowalski's investigation continued, now with full support from the City Council. On September 23rd, the local newspaper, the Millbrook Tribune, ran a front-page story. "Lifeguard had stroke while on duty. Pool district faces criminal probe." The article laid out everything: the timeline, the security footage, Gerald's failure to monitor, the pool district's history of safety violations. Within hours, it was picked up by regional news stations. By that evening, it was on Portland's Evening News. By the next morning, it was national. My phone exploded with messages. Friends, relatives, people I barely knew, everyone wanted to know if I was the girl from the pool. The one who noticed. The one who raised the alarm. I hated it. I hated being the center of attention. I hated watching Nathan's story become entertainment for strangers. But I also felt a grim satisfaction watching the truth unfold in real time, watching people realize how close we'd all come to tragedy, watching the systems that had failed us get exposed and dismantled. On September 30th, the Oregon Department of Health and Human Services announced they were launching their own investigation into pool safety standards statewide. On October 5th, the Millbrook District Attorney's Office announced that Gerald Hoffman was being charged with 4 counts of reckless endangerment and 1 count of official misconduct. On October 12th, Nathan's family held a press conference. His mother, a small woman with red-rimmed eyes, stood at a podium and read from a prepared statement. "My son Nathan is 24 years old. He loved his job. He took it seriously. He saved 3 children from drowning over the course of his employment at Riverside Pool. He was dedicated, responsible, and caring." Her voice broke. On August 14th, Nathan suffered a massive ischemic stroke. He is currently undergoing intensive rehabilitation. He has regained some movement on his right side, but his speech is severely impaired, and doctors say he will likely never return to his previous level of function. Nathan's life has been irrevocably changed. But what haunts me, what keeps me awake at night, is that he sat in that chair for hours, trapped inside his own body, unable to call for help, while the very system that was supposed to support him completely failed. Not just failed him, failed every single child in that pool. We are working with the families of the children who were there that day to ensure this never happens again. I was one of those families. Beverly had been in contact with Nathan's attorneys, and they were building a civil case against the pool district for negligence and failure to maintain safe operations. But more than that, they were pushing for systemic reform. Mandatory health screenings for lifeguards, backup supervision requirements, stricter enforcement of safety protocols, criminal penalties for violations. On October 19th, I got a call from a producer at a national news network. They wanted me to do an interview, tell my story, talk about what I saw. I said no. I wasn't interested in being famous for this, but I did agree to participate in a documentary being made by a local filmmaker about pool safety and municipal liability. They interviewed me on October 26th, and I told the story one more time, but this time to a camera, knowing it would be seen by thousands of people. "I keep thinking about all the what-ifs," I said to the camera. What if Mia hadn't surfaced on her own? What if that toddler had hit his head harder? What if I hadn't said anything? How many other places are operating like this, with systems that look fine on paper but completely fall apart the moment something goes wrong? On November 3rd, Gerald Hoffman pled guilty to 3 counts of reckless endangerment in exchange for dropping the official misconduct charge. He was sentenced to 18 months in county jail, suspended, with 3 years of probation and 500 hours of community service. He was also permanently banned from working in any supervisory capacity at a public recreation facility. The pool district settled with Nathan's family for an undisclosed amount, rumored to be in the 7 figures. They also settled with my family and the families of 3 other children who'd been in the pool that day. The money wasn't the point. The point was what came after. On November 15th, the Oregon State Legislature introduced Senate Bill 432, nicknamed Nathan's Law. It mandated minimum staffing requirements for public pools, required backup lifeguards for facilities over a certain size, instituted mandatory health and wellness checks for on-duty lifeguards, and created criminal liability for managers who knowingly failed to follow safety protocols. The bill passed both chambers with bipartisan support and was signed into law on December 8th. Riverside Pool reopened on January 9, 2024, after extensive renovations and a complete overhaul of their safety systems. There were now 2 lifeguards on duty at all times, plus a pool manager who was required to do rounds every 15 minutes. Security cameras with audio covered every angle of the facility. Every lifeguard wore a medical alert watch that monitored heart rate and could detect falls or sudden changes in vital signs. It was what the pool should have been all along. I went back once in February just to see it. The place looked the same blue water, same yellow umbrellas, but it felt different. Or maybe I felt different. I stood where I'd stood that August afternoon, looking up at the lifeguard chair, and I could still see Nathan sitting there, silent and unreachable. I thought about all the times I'd been to this pool, all the summers I'd spent here, never once thinking about the fragility of the systems that kept us safe. On March 22nd, I got a letter. It was from Nathan. His handwriting was shaky, slanting hard to the right, some of the letters malformed. It took me a while to read it. "Alexis," it said, "I wanted to thank you. The doctors told me what happened that day. They told me you were the one who noticed. You were the one who spoke up. I don't remember any of it, but I know that if you hadn't said something, I might have died in that chair. More importantly, someone else might have died in the water below me. I live with that knowledge every day. I think about those kids, about your sister, about how close we all came to a different ending. I'm getting better slowly. I can walk now with a cane. I can say short sentences. I'll never be who I was before, but I'm alive, and nobody else got hurt. That's because of you. Thank you for being brave enough to trust your instincts. Thank you for not staying silent. Nathan." I cried reading that letter. I cried for Nathan, for the life he'd lost, for the struggle he faced every day. I cried for Mia, who'd had nightmares for months about drowning. I cried for myself, for the weight of knowing that speaking up had mattered, that my voice had changed the outcome. But mostly I cried because I kept thinking about all the times when people notice something's wrong and don't say anything, when they rationalize and assume and trust that surely someone else is handling it. I almost did that. I almost talked myself out of it. If I'd just taken Mia home and said nothing, the story would have ended very differently. On May 10th, I was invited to speak at a national conference on aquatic safety in Denver. I almost said no. Public speaking terrified me, and I still didn't like being the face of this story. But Beverly convinced me to go. "Your voice matters," she said. "People need to hear from someone who lived through this, someone who can explain what it looks like when systems fail in real time." So I went. I stood on a stage in front of 300 aquatics professionals, pool managers, lifeguards, safety instructors, municipal officials, and I told them what happened at Riverside Pool. I told them about Nathan's blank stare, about Mia coughing up water, about the 4 hours of failure that could have cost lives. "The terrifying thing," I said, "is that this wasn't dramatic. There were no alarms, no chaos, no obvious disaster. Just a man sitting in a chair, and kids playing in the water, and everything looking normal until it wasn't. That's how most tragedies happen. Not with a bang, but with a whisper of wrongness that everyone ignores. Don't ignore the whispers. Don't assume someone else is handling it. Don't rationalize away your instincts, because sometimes you're the only one who notices. And that has to be enough." The room was dead silent when I finished. Then someone started clapping, and then everyone was on their feet, and I stood there shaking, overwhelmed, hoping that somewhere in that room was a person who would remember this the next time they saw something wrong and felt that whisper of doubt. I turned 16 on June 3rd. The documentary about pool safety aired on PBS on June 27th. I watched it with my mom and Mia, curled up on our couch, and when it ended, Mia turned to me and said, "You saved my life, you know." I shook my head. "You saved yourself. You surfaced on your own." She smiled. "Yeah, but if you hadn't said something, next time I might not have, or someone else might not have. You made it so next time doesn't happen." She was right. That's what all of this had been about, making sure there wasn't a next time, or at least making it as unlikely as possible. On July 8th, I got an email from Nathan. He was doing better. He could walk without the cane now. His speech was clearer. He was volunteering with a stroke awareness organization, telling his story to help other young people recognize the warning signs. "I'll never be a lifeguard again," he wrote, "but maybe I can help save lives in a different way." On August 14th, 2024, exactly 1 year after the incident, Riverside Pool held a memorial ceremony. Not a memorial for death, but for survival, for the lessons learned, for the changes made. They unveiled a plaque near the entrance. "In recognition of the events of August 14th, 2023, and in commitment to the safety of all who enter here, we remember, we improve, we protect." Nathan was there, standing with the help of his mother, still moving slowly, but moving. Gerald wasn't there. He was completing his community service at a homeless shelter, banned from ever working in public recreation again. The pool district had been completely restructured, its entire board replaced, its policies rewritten from the ground up. I stood with my mom and Mia, looking at that plaque, and felt something settle in my chest. Not closure, exactly. The trauma didn't go away. Mia still didn't like swimming in deep water. I still got anxious around pools. Nathan still struggled every day with the aftermath of his stroke. But we'd turned something terrible into something meaningful. We'd forced the truth into the light, demanded accountability, and created real change. 3 years later, I'm 18 now, about to start college, and I still think about that August afternoon. I think about the moments that define us, the split-second decisions that ripple outward in ways we can't predict. If I'd stayed silent, if I'd convinced myself I was overreacting, if I'd just gone home with Mia and said nothing, what then? Would someone have drowned the next day, or the next week? Would Nathan have died in that chair? I'll never know. What I do know is that speaking up, trusting my instincts, refusing to rationalize away what I saw, that changed everything. Not just for me or Mia or Nathan, but for every kid who swims at Riverside Pool now, and every pool that adopted stricter safety protocols after Nathan's law passed. Sometimes one voice is all it takes. Sometimes noticing is enough. Sometimes the whisper of wrongness is actually a scream, and you just have to be brave enough to listen. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.